let's talk to a former megachurch pastor. You ready for that, JMike? This will be
Sure,
fun.
yeah.
We are going to talk to Jason, him out in California. Hey, you've got a question for us, and you were chatting it up with JMike and SR. Jason, what is up?
Hey guys, it is a pure pleasure talking with you. Love this show. Stumbled across this show probably, about 6 months ago, and it's pretty much all I'm listening to, just eating it up. Real quick before my question, just to give you some background, was a mega church pastor for many, many years, several decades, and I started pulling the string a little bit at a time, and have now been deconstructing over the last 10 years or so. It's been an incredible journey, and I feel a whole lot more freer. And love where I'm at. But here's my question for you guys, and I think it's probably one that a lot of your listeners, especially if they are deconstructing or newly, thinking through different types of paradigms that they would never touch before. One of the things I struggle with today, so I'm calling for advice, is how do you post-church, post-God, post-Christianity, how do you latch on to something larger than yourself and have renewed vision and mission to drive? So let me just back this up really quick. When you're a believer, especially when you're a pastor, you're going to win your city for God. You're going to impact the world. You're going to save all the heathens, right? You're going to do all these amazing, phenomenal things. And then post-deconstruction, there's a little bit of a lag. You get back to regular life and you get back to your job. And that's the portion that I'm struggling with. I'm not struggling with the deconstructing the answers, the new world that I see through new eyes. What I'm struggling with is finding and putting new purpose in place. So I would love to hear from you guys. How did you process through that?
Yeah, let me give
you. As SR, you're way more like
I was a former. Yeah.
Mine's slightly different, coming out of a different space. So
yeah. So let me give you two kind of quick responses to that. Because I'm going to take one in a more literal sense, and I'm going to take one in a more like, this is what I think religious people are actually getting at, or recently deconstructed, deconverted religious people when they say that. So like the one literal side I'm going to take is really, really simple and easy. Nothing. I didn't fucking do anything because I always had that stuff. I always had a feeling of connecting with other people. And I bet you do too. I bet you have always had this feeling of like knowing that you can make a difference in the world. You can, free will conversation aside, you can do good things. You can be a valuable member of society, whatever that means. There are things that get you out of bed in the morning. There are things that just light that spark inside of you, even when you were a believer, right? You had all of those things. Sure, maybe all of it was technically couched in this understanding that, well, it all comes from God and God's super great and yada, yada, yada. Doesn't that make me feel cool? But I bet if you really went back through all of those experiences, you'd discover that when you bought that new car, or you fixed a bike for your neighbor's kid or something, that really you weren't thinking about God. You weren't thinking about the Bible. You weren't thinking about ghosts or heaven or hell or any of that junk. You were just thinking about what it means to be a person. And so the reason I go this sense of it, which I do think is a little bit more literal, not exactly taking the spirit of what's meant by that. And I'll give you my answer in a second. But the reason I take that literal approach is because I really do want to push back against the religious having co-opted so much about what it means to be a person. Like, because we hear that all the time, that the only way you actually have any desire or compassion in life, all motivation, all love comes from this religious understanding. And that's just demonstrably flat bullshit. And we can see that. We know that. We've been through that, you guys. All of us have. And so it's okay to say that, hey, actually, I'm not putting shit in that hole, quote unquote, because there's not a hole to be filled. There's no space that's empty now. Instead of me adding on magic to all of the beauty that I have experienced in the real world around me, now all I have is all the beauty in the real world around me. And that's great. There's no deficiency there. There's nothing that needs to be filled. Okay?
Yeah, you had this mirage of dirty rags
Mhm.
that you now realize, like, you don't have to look. If you, I don't know if you have kids. I mean, I don't, but I couldn't imagine like having, giving birth to some, witnessing the birth of your child and then being instructed by what you believe to look at that infant and declare that it has come into the world like filthy rags. Right. And you gain this, I mean, the purpose within that to recognize that you don't have this really austere, weird, self-loathing kind of purpose, that you're not even worth anything and you have to give all glory. It gives you so much right in your own aspect to carve that out. I mean, for me, a lot of it was, I love philosophy, and I know a lot of, I go into it with the mind. A lot of what could be going on is a lot of word games and things that cloud what's really actually going on in the world. But it's for me, it's awesome. It's like giving me this. I'll wake up, I'll read, whatever book or watch some video, and it really makes me feel like I'm trying to track the world around me, which is like a really cool project to me. I don't know if I'm hitting the mark. I might be fucking missing the mark every time. But that gives me so much purpose. Like, I love, outside my family and friends and all that stuff, I just love knowing that I'm not going to know everything in the world. And it's like this race to try to get as much content as I can. And then and when I have conversations with people, it's cool. It's like, oh, I know that thing. Like, I know what polyploidy speciation is. I'm not a big biology guy, but I know what that. I can talk to you about this. And it's makes those little small individual experiences like extremely meaningful for me. I don't know. Sorry, I feel like I'm cutting off SR, but
no, I agree. Yeah. I think that was that's exactly the point that I was making. And just to finish up, and then I'll give it back to you, Jason. The other side of this I'll take is the more kind of, being a little extra charitable, bending over backwards on the viewpoint there. But what do I replace that feeling with? The answer is skepticism, critical thinking, secular humanism, community that's focused on the real world around me as opposed to an afterlife or something magical, right? Like, again, I still totally stick with that first answer in the sense of I didn't have to replace it with anything because I already had all this stuff, and those things aren't exclusively religious. But if you really want, hey, let's take the question as charitably, as seriously as possible. What do you do when you don't have this God belief in your life? Well, there's lots of other systems out there that seem to be incredibly worthwhile in terms of understanding the world and giving us kind of a framework for what we should do next and where we should go. And that connection to a thing bigger than ourselves that transcends us. I don't like the flowery, magical, spiritually aspect of that, but I like the aspect of it being something very demonstrable, very grounded in the real world, in the sense that humanity as a whole is something bigger than my individual human self here. And that's what I put my faith, I guess, in, if you like. That's what I believe in. I believe in us. I believe in this world. That's bigger than me. The universe is bigger than me. There's all kinds of phenomenal freaking things out there for us, man. And again, like I said earlier, I really think once you step away from the supernaturally religious-y stuff, that's really when you get to discuss the big questions in life. So, but yeah, we shouted a bunch.
Maybe you just want to go help people. Yeah, Jason, let's get your comments. But maybe I just wanted to add just one thing, that maybe now you can actually go, if you wanted to go help people, I don't know, homeless or whatever, if you find purpose in that, and you're now like, I mean, you're not doing it as this kind of expectation of you. It's like coming from a real place within you, if that's what you want to do. And so I don't know, I just find, at least for each individual action that you're doing, there's something like more beautiful about that than probably each individual action you did prior. But anyway, Jason, we're kind of just spewing. So let's give you 30 minutes to talk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
super good. I appreciate the wisdom and insight. It's interesting. A lot of my friends are deconstructing, and I'm noticing it more and more. It could be that they are talking to the guy that deconstructed, and it's a safe environment, so maybe that's why I'm hearing about it. But a lot of career believers are coming to the same crux. For me, deconstructing was not difficult to process through as a skeptic, and I'm eating it up. I'm just chowing all that information, and it's resonating with me. And even if I could go back, I would not go back. So I have a great, a great base that I have, a foundation that I've started to build on. What hit me out of left field was this sense of, wow, when I was a Christian, it was like God was my skeleton, and now there's a sense of being a little bit made out of cartilage, and kind of waving and flowing in the wind a little bit without that construct. And as a believer, things were I had all the answers. They were all spoon fed. I knew what I was supposed to do. A plus B equals C, and we were having big campaigns, and we're out to win the world. Post that experience, I'm learning how to live in the gaps. And in the gaps of life is where I'm finding beauty, and realizing that if this time I have right now is limited, which it is, then I need to, eat as much of it as I can, experience and smell and see, and just be in this moment. But it's not something that, as atheists, we talk a lot about, especially if you have that history. It's a challenge. It's a big challenge, and I think that we need to help people navigate through that. So I appreciate the wisdom.
Yeah. And thank you so much for your thoughts there. Before we let you go, Jason, I definitely just want to mention two awesome nonprofit organizations, if you're not familiar with them, Recovering from Religion and the Clergy Project. Both of them are just absolutely wonderful, places to go and speak with some people. And even if you don't really have this thing that's like really like bumming you out or keeping you, in a state of anxiety or whatever, Recovering from Religion is still there to talk. They're just people that are trained that can help you kind of bounce some ideas off and so forth. And they'll help you get connected with the Secular Therapy Project if that becomes something worthwhile. But the Clergy Project, if you haven't heard of that, Jason, I think you would be very much a member of that. It's literally an entire organization for people who are former pastors of some kind who have stepped away from faith. So definitely a cool place for you.
And Jason, I wanted to ask you a question before you go. When you left the faith, how did it impact your relationships? Was that like a really drastic? I'm just for myself, yeah.
You may not have enough time left in the show.
I've said, and this is the thing that is so common, and I want to highlight this exact thing because,
I think anyone leaving, we all have specific journeys. It's all very, very difficult. I think there's an added level of complexity when you vocationally do that. And it's your job, and it's your community, and you're leading that community. It was devastating. I went through divorce because of it. My partner did not want to go down that path. I lost my full community, and I'm using that in air quotes because it turns out it may not have really been the real sense of community that I was longing for.
But you still believed it to be true. So, there's at the time, that's important. Yeah.
Right. I have a very, very small family, so just 3 or 4 members left, and they decided they did not want to be a part of this deconstruction. So it was a very, very high cost, and I went and had to kind of redefine myself vocationally. So lots of difficulty when you leave, and I think that it's a shame because I think there's so many people that would want to have that freedom. I have way more freedom today. I used to preach about freedom. I used to preach about pure grace and great love and all of these things. And some of those things are true, but I never, ever experienced freedom until today. Like I feel free today. Now I feel like I'm missing some direction on okay, so what do you do with the rest of your life, and where do you impact, and where do where do you actually grow and be and have relationships? Those are things I'm still working on. But as far as legality, like I feel free, but there's a lot of people that did not want to take that journey with me.
Well, I'm not looking at the chat. I'm sure that the chat is absolutely blowing you up with love. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm almost positive that they are. My last question I wanted to ask, do you think that with that impact of how it is with your relationship, or with how it impacted all of your relationships, do you think that that's right? Take all the philosophical arguments, all these, debates. Do you think really what gets in the way for a lot of people is this consequence that's looming, that they're going to understand they're going to lose their friendships, their family might turn their back on them? I'm curious if you think, since, I don't come from that side and you're really well ingrained into it, how much that prevents people from leaving. I'm just kind of curious on your opinion on that.
Yeah. And again, I might be raising the hair on some people's arms here. This is just my experience, and what I went through specifically for me. What I realized is that the love and grace from that community was incredibly conditional. We used to say, it's a fairly common phrase, I think, in contemporary churches today: just come as you are. You don't need to clean yourself up. Just come up and come as you are, and God will clean you up, so to speak. But that's not true. Like, there is a whole community that has a set of rules, and we need to adhere to those. And different points of view and different thinking is not really tolerated. And that's what I experienced. So as this started to unravel for me, and I remember exactly where I was. I was in the middle of a sermon. I didn't have a vision. It wasn't a spiritual moment. It was just me having internal dialogue about, I think I'm done, while I'm standing on stage preaching. I realized that when I pulled that string, it was all going to come undone. And this grace that we preached about actually doesn't hold up when you have somebody like me vocationally going through that type of experience. So yeah, pretty traumatic. And I experience real grace now, actually outside of the church and who I am today, because it doesn't come with a lot of conditions.
I fucking love your attitude, Jason.
Yeah.
Seriously. I'm feeling it right here, man. This is a great call. So
thank you
for sharing. Right back at you guys. Listen, right back at you. I don't have a local community where I can process, and so you guys, I think you know this, but you just need to be told again. These podcasts are incredibly, incredibly life-giving. Like, and I don't mean that from the spiritual, woo-woo type of way. I'm saying that there are people out here listening to this that are eating this up, and I'm one of those. So thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
No, we understand. We were viewers ourselves, and it's helped shape a lot of the way that I think. So
and before we move on, Jason, don't hang up, okay? Do not hang up. I'm not dropping you. I'm going to put you back in the queue for a second, okay? Because we really did have a great time chatting with you, and I think your story is one that unfortunately the bad parts of it did happen and have happened to a lot of people, but I totally agree with JMike. I absolutely love your view on this, man. And I'm so glad that you are coming through this stronger than ever.